Okay, guys, I know you want to talk about it. Kong, Godzilla.
We do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Fine.
Absolutely. It is enjoyable. Let's just put it out there. It was enjoyable.
Okay, you said it was good.
I firmly don't believe it's bad, okay? And I think that I think it is good in its genre. I'm not putting it up there with like, award-winning films for its storytelling. But what I am saying is in the realm of action movies that are largely CGI, this film was good. It gave me everything I needed. Everybody was true to the way that their characters were written. There were 4 epic battles. All of them have a very clear winner. And I walked away satisfied. #Teamzilla. That's all I have to say.
I didn't give away a spoiler.
No,
Okay.
I'm just Teamzilla. And I was Teamzilla going into this. I remain Teamzilla to this day.
So are we familiar with like any of these other like Alien versus Predator, Freddy versus Jason, like these, like there's a few of these versus movies.
Freddy versus Jason.
I'm not sure how
Jason,
many
in my
listeners
opinion,
are.
Freddy versus Jason is the best of those movies. It's actually a fairly fantastic.
Oh,
movie.
I can't. I mean, I can't participate in the conversation. But
You've heard of
you're
them.
talking about familiarity. Then yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as big a fan of the slasher genre as I am of like, I have weird little pets in the popular zeitgeist that I do and don't participate in. So
I bring this up to
say
the only reason why I bring these other ones up is that Kong vs. Godzilla does exactly what these movies always do, which is there is no clear winner. They always team up at the end to fight a third thing. And it's always like 10 minutes of what you want to see, which is monster chaos. And then like 90 minutes of this like stupid human story with all the people that nobody cares about in the movie, where we sit there and do like 30 minutes of people with doing these ridiculous character arcs and having these whole things. And you're just like, can we get back to the smashing? Agree. Amazing watching Tokyo get destroyed. Fantastic. That's what I'm there to see. The rest of the movie is, it's like if you were to go into a restaurant and they were like, this is what you are going to eat is a really good steak, right? And then they gave you like a swimming pool full of like iceberg lettuce, and there was like a piece of beef jerky in the middle. Like that's about how much like of what you actually want versus what you actually have to get through to get to the thing that you want. And then it's never quite as good as you want it to be.
I totally disagree. And not only do I totally disagree, but I would say that this movie had mostly action that was centered around the main characters as opposed to the humans. The humans were all there. They carried part of the plot along, but we didn't overly focus on them. And I will just say it, I think this is a good spoiler. Every time there's a kid in a movie, Tareen always turns to me and says, "Here we go," right? And the "here we go" didn't happen the way that you would think "here we go" on this one. Normally you see this kid and you're like, this kid's gonna be hanging off of a cliff and somebody's gonna have to save this kid. And instead that's not the arc of the story. And so I think that part is good. Like there's so much stuff focused on the main characters. And I honestly think that the villain in all of this is capitalism. Totally. I think anybody who watches it will see that. And so it's really easy to root in this movie for capitalism to fail because it is the clear, antagonist in all of this.
Yeah,
As opposed to every other movie.
I have to agree. And I think that the majority of our listeners who are women aged 18 to 39, they definitely know what we're talking about. And I think that they agree too.
Hey, Flo is a woman age 18 to 39, and I watched it with 2 women who were age 18 to 39.
Feel free to write in, folks. Let us know.
Basically, the man who is 18 to 39 on this show is like, yeah, I definitely don't want to talk about this, which is fine. We can also talk about the fact that Shannon.
Yeah, but if we're talking demos, I mean, if it was mostly men, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we were want to talk demos, apparently Shannon and I are on the list to get unsolicited sex text. And
All day, baby.
that's the thing we're getting now once a day is just
Once a day.
you know, people soliciting us or telling us they're at home alone and that we should reach out to them for sex. So that's another fun part.
I think marketing is just broken these days. And please forward all of those to me. Well, not the dicks, but the other ones.
The other kinds.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, like, that to me is like, it's like the modern equivalent to like dudes who would just hang out on the bus, and like every woman who gets on the bus, they're just like, hey. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, girl.
And like, hey, these dudes don't do this. Like, it has to work sometimes, right? Like, nobody would do it if it had a 0% success rate.
Correct.
The same thing has to be true for like this like texting thing where some dudes just like, I'm just going to put random numbers in my phone and blast out pictures of my dick to like a million women. And if one of them is like, yeah, all right, let's see what's up with this dick, then it's like worth the whole thing or something. Is that like just like extremely wide nets that we're casting here? Is that that?
I haven't even opened any of these messages, so I don't know what I'm missing out on.
Yeah,
I just
don't
immediately delete them. But
you know, some guy took a lot of time to compose those messages and like selected your number specifically.
How about a little empathy for him?
Yeah. He's putting in the work.
He just needs to reach out to his target demo to respond, which is people aged 65 to 95. Like, that's who's going to respond. The same people who get caught up in the Nigerian prince scam are going to be like, I wonder what you'd like for me to see. Let me click on this link. Like,
or last week.
You know?
I think you're onto something, Flo. Yeah, marketing is broken these days. We're still, folks just don't know how to make things work.
Yeah.
But you know, we know how to make this podcast work, so let's do it.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And you have Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
Hooray.
All right. We had the rare double intro today where we start doing one and then just like take a sharp left into another one.
I liked it, and I'm very interested to see how it comes out.
We got to clean up these intros. I feel like I had a moment where I recently met a bunch of my girlfriend's family for the first time. And of course, like the fact that I do the show comes up. And so now I'm getting these things where it's like she's like, oh, like I think my mom is listening to your show or whatever. And I'm like, is it the episode where I'm talking about Godzilla topping King Kong?
Right.
like, oh no.
That consistently stresses me. Like, because I just don't think about who's listening or watching. I just don't. And then I end up talking to random people and I'm like, oh my God, like this legislator is listening. Like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, actually, folks.
I don't care if legislators hear me wondering about King Kong's sex life. That's of little consequence. Actually, I get.
But if your girlfriend's parents are,
that's not.
You know, that's the real you. That's
if they're gonna
it's
like
best
you,
if they never
like
find out that that's the real me.
Yet here we are.
There's like 100 something episodes of just like pure
that's
ridiculous.
That's generally where I am on it. It's like we've said a lot of wild things over the last, year plus. If someone wants to go back and put away like literally like 5 days of their life to listening to every episode, you go right ahead and you earned whatever you find out about us through that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, reach out if you are the parent of the partner, you go ahead and reach out, and we will give you via Twitter the best intros to listen to so that you can get to know Skylar.
Absolutely. Actually, that just reminded me, Skylar, your mom asked me a question and said that you have her contact info. So remind me after the show.
Oh, good. Glad these worlds are colliding. This is
Skylar
going
loves
really
when we talk about his mom.
It's like a
Hi.
Skylar
on the
vortex.
show.
I loved that you said.
Kev was like, so Skylar, I was having coffee with your mom, and
Just the two of us like drinking
guys
together. I like it. Okay. Well, we are all family here in the Voices universe, the Voices cinematic universe.
Yeah, the VCU.
Yeah.
oh,
So I want to begin this show because I think we've got some really interesting stuff to talk about. And I think it relates to some other things that you might learn about, what Voices thinks about things if you are new to Voices. So you're going to get a good sort of look at who we are and what we're about and what issues of the day usually matter to us. In particular, let's discuss today policing in America. And let's start it out wider than we usually do. We usually stay local and state level, but let's talk about some big things that are happening in different little places around the country and what that says about what could be happening here in California, in which really there should be no obstruction to actual police reform, right? So we're seeing some things happen throughout the US. One, New York City has just ended qualified immunity.
Can somebody run us through what qualified immunity is and what it means and why it's good that it's over in New York?
Dr. Flo.
Sure. I mean, qualified immunity just basically means that when police do certain things that you and I, as lay people do, they are protected from the consequences of that legally.
So whereas we would be prosecuted,
they are not.
At the very least, sued.
Right, exactly.
They are safe from
they are
lawsuits.
protected. And so it basically ends that practice so they actually can be held accountable.
So if they shoot an unarmed person, they can be held accountable. Correct. If they use excessive force and then just say, I was scared, or, well, look at the footage. I said, stop resisting, right?
Right.
Still, they are not protected anymore by qualified immunity.
Yep.
Qualified immunity is a racist law or thing that was put into place, right? I mean, this was put into place in the 60s. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson tweeted about this. He said the New York City Council just voted to end qualified immunity for police officers, making New York City the first city in the country to do so. Then he said qualified immunity was established in 1967 in Mississippi to prevent freedom riders from holding public officials liable even when they broke the law. Funny that we should have this conversation today. How they made it illegal for folks to hold public officials liable.
That rules. Have you seen the bootlicker responses to this about how this is terrible and why this is terrible and whatnot?
Tell us more.
The bootlickers are all up in arms in New York because they're like, well, if we can sue the cops, then the cops won't do anything. They'll be so afraid of lawsuits that they won't stop any crimes for fear of being sued. So basically they're like if you go on Twitter right now and look for this, you can there's all these bootlickers being like, the cops are just going to stand around and wait for crimes to happen. They
What's so funny about this is there's another profession that has had a similar setup, and people have complained about the same thing, and we haven't seen that happen. And that's actually medicine, right? Lots of people have, been able to sue for medical malpractice. And what it's done is it's essentially tightened up the way that medicine is practiced in the US. And made it so that people are actually accountable for the outcomes and not doing the wrong thing. And the medical profession has improved since these standards have been put in place, and fewer patients die, there's less malpractice, and there's just generally a better regulation of who gets to maintain their license and continue to practice medicine in the United States.
That's the major difference, right? Is that they're licensed and you can get your license pulled. And it's not like if that happens to you as a doctor, you can just go to a different hospital and continue to do malpractice, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which qualified immunity does not help with for the cops, but it's a step in the right direction.
Right.
Right.
But a lot of people complained about the exact same thing you're saying, Skylar, and said, like, if your doctors can be sued, this is going to be terrible for everyone because they're just going to be so risk averse that you're not going to be able to get procedures that you need, and that people that, that it's going to have all of these negative consequences. And honestly, it hasn't happened that way.
Well, the other side that's funny about it too is that people who are like, oh, the cops will just sit around and wait for crimes to happen. Is like,
you promise?
Yes. Like, well, like yes. Also, what do you think they're doing now?
You promise?
Like all cops do is sit around and react to crimes after they happen. Like that's how it works. What do you think? I want to know what these people who what these people think the cops are doing all day.
But when they're not, they are actively going out and harassing people who are not even doing crimes.
Right.
And accusing them of doing crime so that they can reach some sort of quota or, do what they consider community policing by beating folks up who are jaywalking.
But it would actually be an improvement if they would wait around for crimes to happen. Like, that would be better than the general harassment that Dave is talking about that's happening to people, and so many of the preemptive things, right? I shot him because I thought, right? I decided to go after them because I was trying to prevent, like, if they could stop. My general feeling is that the police are not good at prevention. So if they could stop what they think prevention is and let actual prevention experts do prevention, that would be an improvement for all of us.
Yes, and I trust a public health professional to work on prevention much more than I trust a beat cop rolling their nightstick in their hand, strolling down the street to do that.
Their idea of prevention is stop and frisk.
Yeah.
Right. like that's what prevention looks like to them. So please don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about this throughout the show, but it's when I look at something like this and what's going on in other cities, I can't help but think we're winning. The people, the Defund the Police movement, the police abolitionists are winning, and things are moving in a direction that nobody ever would have thought they would have 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I always want to stop and think about the libs, the moderate Democrats that are like, well, defund the police is not it's not popular and you shouldn't do it. Maybe we should workshop this. No. If the movement wasn't doing exactly what they have been doing the last year, 2 years, 3 years, this doesn't reach this point. It just doesn't. You can't like means test and like go to a back room and like ask people, litmus test how they feel about something, a term or whatever. Remember 9 years ago, what people thought when they heard Black Lives Matter? Yes. Now, where are we? Right?
It's on your Amazon home screen.
It's on your Amazon home screen. And when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, his approval rating was at a similar level as defund the police as a concept is today.
Yep.
And now how do we view him?
We have a day where we get off nationally for his birthday.
Yeah.
Phrasing. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, not only that, but if you are a whack lib, you are contractually obligated to like really care about the message of Martin Luther King Jr. and to like march with people and whatnot. You have to do it. You cannot, even as a Republican now, you can't criticize Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, and yet, the libs still do try to whitewash him, right? Like, they don't talk about how he was an anti-capitalist. They don't talk about how, he actually warned folks against, and I think he did this in his letter from the jail, against the white moderate, which is you libs. It's the Bidens of the Americas right now, and yet you still try to co-opt him. So I don't know. I look at something like what's happening in New York, and it's just like, that's a win. And that has nothing to do with libs. That has nothing to do with them, and everything to do with direct action people, or, organizers, people who actually organize people together, put in the work, and just like, made themselves known. And I think that's extremely important.
We're willing to go further than to just like tut. Oh, somebody should do something about these bad cops, but mostly the status quo is great.
Yeah, and there are a lot of folks, particularly in media, which we can talk about after this episode, or in other spaces, elected officials that are like, well, why are you going out and demonstrating? Why are you going out and doing this and doing that? And why are you giving us a hard time at the, Board of Soups meeting and city council meetings and blah, 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 blah? Why don't you just go out and elect someone? They're acting like we're not doing that already. This is one part of a multi-sided movement, right? Yeah. The legislative side is not the same as the electoralist side, is not the same as the direct action side, and they all work in tandem. So what folks are doing on the streets, that doesn't happen. Like this legislation, this new way of approaching qualified immunity in New York, it doesn't happen without them, without the real ones out there in the streets. So I really want to drive that home today, that it's absurd when libs say, well, vote, well, elect someone. Like, no, these folks are doing as much as anyone else in politics, if not more in some regards, right?
Right. Well, and like you said, Dave, I mean, the other thing to consider is we're going to go through, because there's like a few different stories we're going to talk about today in this vein, but like, it's like, and I say this as the resident pessimist of the show, but things do appear to be working.
We're winning.
Things are moving in a positive direction.
Fine. So can we talk about what came out in the Oregonian the other day? This is
my favorite part, by the way.
I
loved every word of this article.
So
Portland.
A piece came out of Portland titled "Overworked, Overwhelmed, and Burned Out: Why Portland Cops Say They're Leaving in Droves." So, some numbers here. Since July 1st of, I assume, 2020, 115 officers have left Portland PD. 74 retired, 41 resigned, 2 more are resigning this month, and 1 is retiring.
Bye-bye.
See
ya.
The Bureau is authorized to have 1,210 positions, 916 sworn officers, right? Which I think that's a silly term. I mean,
a lot of police officers. I don't know the size of Portland. I meant to look this up after reading the article, but like Sacramento has 500,000 people, and we have like high 6s, low 7s. So 916 sworn officers is a lot.
Yeah.
Are these, it makes you wonder.
Well, they're considered low, I think, nationally.
Are these numbers, because this was written, oh, never mind. I guess I'm thinking about like Was there an uptick in hires as a result of summer uprising? But I guess
So they're
I don't know.
claiming there are hires, but who knows what that means.
Yeah.
Let me give this stat. FBI data from 2019, the latest available, showed there were 1.3 sworn officers per 1,000 population in Portland, or 889 sworn officers. So it was near the limit out of a 662,114 population. That's below the average rate nationally of 2.4 officers per 1,000 people. Now, so that's a little bit lower. And I don't know what Sacramento's about, but maybe that's why they keep trying to hire more cops. But I think, again, this is them leaving. Can I read some of a few quotes on what they're thinking?
Yes.
And then I'm just going to open it up to you three, because I'm talking a little too much this episode. Okay. First paragraph that stood out to me is a quote. In 31 exit interview statements, the employees who turned in their badges or retired were brutally frank about their reasons for getting out. Quote, the community shows zero support. The city council are raging idiots.
Raging.
In addition to being stupid. Wow, both idiots.
Glad you threw that in there. Yeah, good. Way to specify.
Wow. Additionally, the mayor and council ignore actual facts on crime and policing in favor of radical leftist and anarchist fantasy.
Yikes.
What's worse is PPD command, that's lieutenant and above, is arrogantly incompetent and cowardly, one retiring defective detective wrote. Defective, my edit. Should I
like
keep
the
reading?
follow-up. Yes, please.
Okay. There's a couple more here. Scrolling down a bit. Police leaders acknowledge...
No, you gotta talk about the
finish that guy.
Titanic?
Okay.
Or finish that person's, I should say.
The only difference between the Titanic and PPB, he continued, deck chairs and a band.
What an unbelievable doofus. Who would say this?
That was
This
my
is the
favorite.
detective of the law.
That was my favorite. Like, listen. My favorite.
What? Okay,
This
so
guy's
my favorite part of this entire thing, right? Because, like, to put this in perspective, if you've been living under a rock, like following the George Floyd protests of last summer, Portland went hard. Portland had like over 100 straight days of protests, where people were in the street battling the cops, like coming up with like tactics to counter gas, coming up with tactics to counter flashbang grenades, coming up with tactics to counter projectiles being shot at them. Like,
I remember one video where
stuff.
they used a cop's own spikes that were being used to try and break someone's, like, slash someone's tires as they drove by against a cop car, and the cop had to drive off with a flat tire.
Did you see the ones where the cops would launch those tear gas grenades in, and they just had like a squad of dudes with leaf blowers who would just come out and just blow the gas back at the cops?
I did.
And they just had it dialed in. Incredible. Just absolute chef's kiss. Portland rules. The other thing that the thing that is my favorite about this, right, is the cops being like, we don't have any community support, which I mean, it's hilarious for like a very obvious, like for extremely obvious reasons, right? Like you've seen the video, you saw that famous video of the cops just rolling through a suburb in Portland, and somebody comes out onto their porch to like see what's up because there's like a squad coming down the street.
Yeah.
And they yell at her to go back in her house and then just start shooting rubber bullets like
I think they yelled like light her up, and then they started shooting.
Exactly. So that's what these guys are doing, and then they're like, the community doesn't like us.
What do they like us? What are we doing wrong?
Job. Here's another thing. So here's the thing that I want to I really want to drive home here, right? If you've been to a protest where things are tense between the cops and the protesters, you will see protesters get up into the faces of cops and like scream at them, right? In an effort to demoralize them. And the first couple of times, at least for me, that I saw this done were like pretty shocking, because you don't often in real life see somebody get in somebody else's face and like attempt to tear them down in that way. And it's like, it's pretty like intense to watch. And your first reaction to it is like, wow, that's pretty messed up to like do that to another human being because it's so hostile, right? But because of the way that things are ordered, that's really one of the, like, it's really one of the best tactics you have, is to try and do that, to get into the heads of these cops who are just sitting there in their like little LARPy riot gear, like waiting for an opportunity to like shoot somebody in the head with a rubber bullet, or like mutilate somebody with another one of their, you know, Batman gadgets or whatever.
Which we all went through 2020, and we saw across the nation, cops in every jurisdiction are more than happy to brutalize.
Right. So what it comes down to is that like the best thing that you can do is get up in these like and honestly, it's kind of funny, but like apparently hurting their feelings by yelling at them is a decent tactic, because all of these cops are quitting. Right. So morale,
right. I mean,
absolutely. It's great. Like, absolutely. If you have the chance and you're like in this situation, get in a cop's face and tell him to quit. Like, tell him he's terrible, him or her. Tell him he should get a job that actually serves his community. Tell him he's a Nazi. Tell him he's a fascist. All of those things are true. And it works because these cops eventually don't want to stand here and get screamed at, and they'll leave, apparently.
I don't know.
I'm with it. I think that's a great tactic.
I don't know how you can look at these numbers from Portland and say that the praxis that these folks out there are doing is not working.
No, it's working great.
Yeah. I mean, it's breaking them down, right? Like if what needs to happen in order for cops to have a mass exodus from communities is communities to continue to show up and let them know that their bullshit isn't welcome by using leaf blowers and all of the like amazing things that Portland did, then like we need to open that manual and do that here. Because
well, when the cops come out with that stuff, when the cops get the riot gear out and they come out with the gas and they come out with the rubber bullets and everything, like at that point in a community where they aren't welcome, like Portland or like Sacramento, in many cases, the cops are an occupying force. They're not welcome. Like they are infringing in a community that does not want them there. They're not welcome to be there. And I applaud any protester who does anything that they have in their arsenal to make sure that the cops understand that they are regarded as an enemy and as a trespasser in a neighborhood they're not welcome in.
And I do want to say, like, I do want to say that, and I think I've said it on the show before, everyone that shows up in demonstration against the bullshit that the cops are pulling in our community are
Tuesday
local
episode,
heroes. Oh, sorry. Anyway, these are our local heroes. These are folks that like are showing up and doing the stuff that most people wouldn't be willing to do, right? Like, and Sacramento has shown up time and time again to make sure that cops know that they're not welcome
in larger and larger numbers too. Can I read this paragraph? It's very brief, but it speaks to what you two are saying. Police leaders acknowledge the morale problems and Portland's particular place in the national reckoning against racial injustice and police violence. The city has been racked by months of protest confrontations, lawsuits alleging excessive force by police, and political reforms that cut the budget amid a rising tide of shootings and homicides. I mean, what else can you say other than it's working? Like everything, and like I guess I'm belaboring the point a little bit, but I think it's worth belaboring that their praxis, the folks on the street, is resulting in cops leaving their jobs, especially probably the most violent cops,
and leaving those communities. I mean, here's the thing that Portland and Sacramento do have in common is that in extremely high numbers, the cops who are working the streets in Portland and Sacramento don't live there. Like Sacramento has like one of the lowest records in the nation for like cops who actually live in the areas that they're policing. Portland has more than we do, but not by very much. I think most of Portland's police force comes from like the pretty white supremacy Proud Boy rural areas around Portland. Like that's their police force there. So really when these guys leave and these guys quit the force, it's like, yeah, get out of Portland. Go back to like whatever podunk little Proud Boy, you know, I almost said Placerville, but I'm trying not to bash on Placerville on the show, where you're from, and go do that there. Or don't do it there, really, honestly, but like don't do it here. You're not welcome to do it here.
What I think compounds that issue, Skylar, that you're talking about with, you know, police officers not living in the city is a financial investment as well, right? So in most cities, police officers are some of the highest paid, you know, public servants, right? And I'm using that in air quotes. And so they are some of, you know, the highest paid public employees, and they are taking that tax revenue and paying paying property taxes and other taxes to other neighboring places. So it's not even a reinvestment in the actual, you know, tax base of the city that's paying them. And so, you know, when we're talking about, you know, investing, we're talking about inclusive economic development. Like, where are you spending your time, your dollars, and you know, when you're outside of work, it's not in here. So we're not benefiting back from those investments either. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind as we start talking about budgeting, is like, you're not contributing back to the community that you're occupying, and, you know, and that you're, you know, taking a salary from, but you don't contribute back in any meaningful way to the city's coffers.
Yeah.
That said, cops are welcome to keep drinking in Roseville and Citrus Heights. I'm good if the cops don't come here and come down to these bars. Thanks. Just for the record. I'm sure there's bar owners who would disagree with me on this.
My bigger point was we could also just, you know, actually hire, because that's not necessarily the case for our other city employees, right? They are more likely to live in the city. They often pull in, and, you know, unfortunately, you know, lower wages in some instances, maybe fortunately lower wages. But, you know, there is a way that we could invest those dollars in public employees in a way that actually benefited our communities. And so I think this is one of the ones that just layers on top of itself as being a really traumatic and ill-advised investment.
Absolutely. And it's nice to see the spell finally being broken. I'm just going to read one more excerpt because I'm just too happy.
This Oregonian article is just a delight.
Yeah.
It is.
Some of the police who are leaving said they found little to no support from City Hall. One training officer who retired in January also said officers are, quote, depolicing due to fear of being accused of excessive force, unquote. Interesting. Quote,
again, you promise?
Exactly. Quote, what the city council has done to beat down the officers' willingness to do police work is unfathomable, he wrote. I have never seen morale so low. Officers leaving mid-career and sometimes sooner to go to other agencies. Officers retiring when they would have stayed longer if the situation were different. He said he knew it was time to go because he stopped looking forward to work that he once loved. It is no longer I love it.
Like, just when he says stop looking forward to work that he once loved, these are guys who like dress up in riot gear and like beat up unarmed women in the streets of Portland.
Yeah. It is no longer a fun place to work. There is no end in sight, and the negatives far outseed anything positive. Hate what Portland has become.
Yikes.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out.
Right. I will say, you know, one of the pieces I know wasn't one we highlighted, but that really kind of stood out to me was there was a Latino officer who was under 30 that like talked about leaving, you know, and was basically saying there is no community policing aspect here. And I'm really curious, like, what made that person decide to be part of the police force in the first place. I don't know if they thought that they were like a bridge builder or something, but the thing that stood out in one of the things he said was like, too many officers believe in they're better than the public because they're cops. Still too many officers who aren't culturally competent and refuse to have an open mind about the struggles of the community. And then the following, which is not surprising, that only a handful of the 31 who filled out the forms were Black, Latino, or Native American. Most were white men. And it reminds me of the data from the Pew, you know, Research Center from, I think it was 2018 or 17, and they polled like 8,000 police officers from across all these different departments across the nation that have at least 100 officers. And what they found is that almost all white officers believe that the U.S. has already made changes to give Black and white people equal rights. And yet, like 92% of white officers believe that, and only 29% of Black officers agreed. And so it was really interesting to see that even within the police force, there is this major chasm between what the white officers believe versus what the officers of color believe. And the Pew Research Center goes on to ask all of these really great and amazing questions, comparing officers of different, you know, racial and ethnic backgrounds to the general population with different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And it's really amazing to see how much more police are subject to some of the indoctrination, right? Because like only 12% of Black people thought that the country had gotten to a good place, but 30% of Black officers did. But that's staggering compared to like 60% of white people overall, but 92% of white officers. Mm-hmm. There's something about the mind frame of people who are going into policing that differs even from people of their same racial and ethnic background who are not police, right? They're seeing a world that looks very different than the other people who are sharing their racial and ethnic experience. Kind of fascinating.
It is, yeah. Well, let's take a look at California. You know, we had a couple of small wins in the fights last year. Well, there were definitely some electoral wins. I mean, they tried, the police tried to get Reggie Jones Sawyer out of office. They did an ad with a target on his face and he won his position. They tried to defeat our new district attorney in Los Angeles County, who is hardcore progressive, and he ended up winning his race. And so, you know, Chesa Boudin is district attorney of San Francisco right now. Mm-hmm. There have been some real wins electorally. Over the cops.
And then the propositions, right? So they tried to repeal Proposition 47, which was essentially downgrading a lot of low-level crimes. And they tried to repeal it, and that repeal failed. So people wanted to keep those reforms to not criminalize people. You know, similarly, actually, the bail reform, the referendum, I always have to think about, did it pass? Did it fail? But essentially, we decided not to do away with cash bail because the actual concern was that the pretrial risk assessment was racist in its composition, and that there was actually a chance to get something better, which was just doing away with bail altogether without replacing it with something that was better, but still problematic. So there were a couple of those things. And now people who have been previously convicted of felonies do have the right to vote in California, which was a major win on the ballot. So there were a lot of things that were happening there as well that were all, you know, losses for law enforcement that opposed them.
There's also a bunch of movement right now with bills like SB2. Right. There's like a lot of stuff like on the docket right now. It hasn't passed yet, but there's movement on it. Like, so we're talking about ending qualified immunity in California as well. That's on the agenda. Like we were saying earlier, when Flo, you were talking about doctors and being decertified if you are, you know, if you're doing malpractice, there is a process like that lined up for police officers to cut down on the fact that cops can just go get jobs in different departments after and continue to do brutality. So there are like some things on the books, like hopefully we'll see if they go. It seems like things are going that way, right? Like Austin Dave, you shared an article earlier where like Austin defunded their cops to a degree and are spending that money, investing that money back into the community in ways that are good, right? Like it seems like there is like
supportive housing. Yeah.
Right.
In
it
like
seems
a
like
very
there's momentum.
tangible way.
Right.
Yeah, no, and so it does feel like there's movement. And so again, like, you know, I'll be the sweet summer child and you can push back on this, Skylar, but we're winning. We're winning. And like what I think, and like I only say this because I think morale is a big part of some of these things very often, right? When you look at how Portland PD talked about their situation in that article, their morale is, you know, bottomed out and the worst of the worst in that department, among others, right? Like Flo, you mentioned there's an officer that was like, wow, this is not the culture I expected here. And I do not like this and I'm going to leave. But folks are leaving. There is a shift. It is moving in this direction. And it kind of doesn't matter what our libs in office say, what the quote, very serious people, you know, throughout California have to say. This thing has legs and it's moving. And, you know, you can hem and haw about like the way people are doing things, but I don't know if you can look at the actual movement that's happened and really, if you can really look in the mirror in the morning and say that I said the right thing, if you claim that the demonstrators are not a central part of what made this what it is today, what makes these, you know, these little wins here and there what they are today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we got a lot of work still left to do in California. Like most of this stuff that's like actually cool and substantive has not passed yet. So
yes,
right.
But there's a lot of good stuff like up. I mean, there's even a bill right now to make it so that, you know, existing military equipment that police officers have, or the police departments have, and the acquisition of new equipment would require external, you know, approval before it could be continued to be used, or before new equipment could be acquired. I think we've talked before about Senator Wiener's bill, you know, making it
271.
so that that we're now opening up, you know, the opportunity for sheriffs to not have to be law enforcement, right? So there are all of these like, you know, cool things that potentially could pass that really could shift the landscape and continue to shift the landscape towards the things that I think many of us who are justice minded would like to see happen.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned SB 271. You know, obviously we all want Skylar to be the next sheriff of Sacramento County.
Of course.
Right. And I again, like looking at Sheriff Scott Jones, who is basically Joe Arpaio light, America's largest adult son, Scott Jones, has, you know, decided he's not going to run again for office. And I think it's because of the pressure he's facing. I honestly do. I think this is where little by little we're seeing cracks in this third rail of politics previously, that it's like, nah, they are not infallible and they are not like untouchable for politicians today. And I think what we need to continue to do is to be staunch in our positions that nobody should support anybody who takes cop money. Full stop. Right. So we have 2 city council members, Katie Valenzuela, Mai Vang, here in Sacramento, who made that pledge. And in the future, in 2022, I want to see the same thing for city council there. In 2022, I want to see that at our board of supervisors. I also want to see that in our state Senate race for Dr. Pan's seat. And if we don't, you don't support them. They don't deserve support.
This might go over tough. Back to my favorite of our neighboring counties, Placer County. I'm worried I'm gonna like start some like inadvertent beef with Placer County. Did you see their sheriff
Is it
rules
inadvertent
too?
when you call them out by name? Is that inadvertent
Yes,
still?
I'm sticking to inadvertent. Inadvertent is
Oh,
the
okay.
correct wording, and I stand by it. Did you see this thing in this Cal Matters article about their sheriff and like what's going on with him, where he just got himself, their sheriff, right? Got himself into trouble for suggesting that somebody died from getting vaccinated for COVID-19, which obviously turned out to be complete nonsense. Obviously,
That's the problem when your sheriff is also your coroner.
Yeah,
like, this dude who's just like, I don't like COVID, so I'm gonna say he died of COVID. I don't believe in it. So
like that I had never really thought about that before, but like the implications of having the sheriff also be the coroner, like the guy who does the official judgments on why people died. I'm blanking on how to even go like begin to unpack what that, like the implications of what that means for like a Placer County. That's incredible. I mean, talk about having a fox guarding the hen house, right?
Yeah, and we have multiple sheriffs throughout the state who are the coroners of their county.
Yeah.
Not only that, even in counties where they're not, the coroners are political, and the coroners will do what law enforcement tells them to because they have very close relationships and they don't want to go to work feeling awkward. It's not a good dynamic, and it's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Ultimately, okay, here's a question. What would be, if you could do, like, aside from just like, you know, signing the police abolition legislature and pushing that through, what do you think would be like the most, like one of the best tools that you can think of that we like could be passed to combat police misconduct and brutality? Like for me, one of the things I have long thought would be a great way to go about it is not only to end qualified immunity, but then to take the lawsuit, like the settlement money that people get from these lawsuits out of the police pensions,
yeah,
hit them in their retirement. I guarantee you, if they were on the hook to pay like these settlements, they'd be turning in the problematic members of their ranks like instantly. Like they'd be turning each other in left and right if there were like if the cops personally had any kind of financial stake in like paying these settlements out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in the absence of abolition, accountability that comes with an actual consequence that you feel in your checkbook, right? Like this is a thing that at the end of your time being a cop, you know that you're going to get to kick your feet up and drink your Coors Light and
beat your wife,
all of those things on the city or the county's money, on this like wild pension that you get to receive. But if you had to think about how your life is changed forever as a result of, you know, if officers who killed people got that settlement money taken away from them, I think we would probably see them acting with a little bit more thought, and turning each other in.
I like a little bit of carrot and stick. So I like the idea of not only are you on the hook for the bad stuff, but we actually like want to incentivize the things we want to see happen. So I would love for the reverse quota system where like the fewer people you arrest and detain, the more money you get paid. Like, I would love that. Like, I would love for you to be paid for like the number of positive reviews of your interactions with people gave you a bonus each year. Like, I'd love for it to be, not only are you on the hook for the bad stuff, but like, we are actively rewarding you for not doing policing as it is currently described.
What is a positive interaction with a cop?
I don't know. It's up to the community to decide. So you don't get your bonus if nobody thinks they had one.
Yeah. I haven't arrested anybody in 37 years, so feel free to. I'll put my Venmo in the show notes.
I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of a ticket mandate, right? Of like, you got to write 500 tickets today in order to, like, it's like the opposite of that. Like, how many people can you help today? And the more of them you help who feel helped by you, the more money you can stand to make.
I like that.
Yeah. I'll take a harder line. And I will say, we just need to drastically reduce our police force in favor of other public safety strategies, right? I mean,
well, sure.
Yeah, sorry if that's a little on the nose, but I do want to say that one thing that I think has changed the game is body cameras, because also just like the fact that we all have cameras today. But the fact that these are things that are mandatory and are there on cops all the time, we started seeing over and over again what their behavior actually looked like. And they thought
in the instances where they release the footage, which is not every instance.
Yeah. I mean, imagine the ones where they don't, right?
Exactly.
So like, that's the fascinating thing to me. It's like cops throughout the country signed on to it when this idea was presented, and they're like, yeah, we'll show you, we're always scared for our lives and blah, blah, blah. And like, we're doing the right thing and blah, blah, blah. And then you look at the footage and you're like, oh my God, this is horrible, horrible. And we're pushing back and saying this behavior is not okay. And actually, like, this is criminal behavior. And cops are reeling now. They don't know what to do. So I always think, it's a journalist thing. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And in as much as they thought that this footage, them showing footage is going to exonerate them, will absolve them of what they do, it does not. It does the exact opposite.
I think there are also, though, and I'm not a hardliner on this, but I think we'd be remiss not to point out that there are legitimate privacy concerns with police body cameras. There's a lot of people who take issue with the fact that they are going to come into your private residence recording, whether you want them to or not. They're going to record you while you are having, say, like you are in the middle of a mental health crisis that you might not want to be like a public video. It's going to be once that happens. So I say this only to say that I think there is a conversation worth having around a constant body cams, not to say that I'm for or against them really either way right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I'm willing to have that nuanced conversation too, right? On the future of something like that. I prefer they have their cams on if they're going to just do something horrible to somebody for no reason in their own home. But like, we also have to make sure that person's privacy and who they are is protected. Yeah. I think a lot about prisons and how opaque they are, and we know nothing about the abuses that prison guards are doing to folks. And from the stories I've heard, it is horrific, and it's worse than anything we can imagine. And I think we need some sunshine rules in our prisons, and I hope we can legislate something like that in the state.
Agree with that 1,000%.
Yeah. Any other thoughts today?
I want to close by saying that I love all of these takes, these perfect police takes. The only issue that I take with any of it is that the conversation is now at an end, and once it ends, there won't be any more perfect takes for me to read anywhere. And I think that's a real shame. It's making me really sad. And it would be great if somebody had some news that could turn my frown upside down.
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, Skylar. And I think I'll take this one, everyone. There is a place known only for its perfect takes, and it's called voicesrivercity.com. We started in April of 2017, and it started out as a news and arts coverage media outlet that included community essays from folks who were speaking truth to power. It also includes now, and did then, the SAC Follows the Money project, where we show you by spreadsheet who is giving money to whom. Are the cops giving money to this elected official or potential elected? Are the real estate developers doing that? We do our work to show that to you. It's really important work. We also, of course, in the most recent iteration of Voices River City, have the podcast. The podcast, we've been around, I mean, this iteration of it, post Anthony Sino era, is we started around September of 2019, and we've built it into something pretty cool, I think, and fun. And we've had a lot of folks come on here from all corners of the capital L left to talk about what they're doing. And I think we should be really proud of that. And so keep listening for more of that from more folks. We are on social media. We're on Facebook, Voices River City, on Twitter at Voices River City, Instagram at Voices River City. The biggie, though, you can listen to us twice a week as opposed to just once a week. That's 2 hours a week over 1 hour a week for just $5 a month. If you go to patreon.com/voicesrivercity, become a patron for as little as the hot chocolate you're not yet getting at the coffee shop you're going to. And yeah, you get to hang out with us on those special episodes. We get a lot more sweary. You might be surprised by all the bleeps you heard this week, but we do get more swear. We find ways. And we what else about us? Like, we also have a store. You can get coffee mugs. You can get White Claw koozies. You can get t-shirts and stickers. voicesrivercity.com/store, I believe. Or is it shop? Shop. Okay. And that's it. I mean, we are all.
We also, if you want a Voices River City sweater for your pet, Flo will crochet one. So that's also.
She will
an
not.
option. No, she will.
She will not.
Flo has a lot of time.
During COVID, she's like picking up stuff, and she do it in different
She's definitely not
colors
working 16 hours a day. Yeah.
No, she's doing a lot of pet vests. So
she's doing
jump
the
on
next
that
thing
while
she's
she's
working
doing
on her like pet slippers, footies, because it's summertime and it gets hot on the asphalt and you got to protect their feet. So she's
very important.
She's working on those,
and they should be doing that in style with Voices River City branding.
Yes, that's what I'm gonna work on.
So Flo's gonna share her contact info soon.
Yeah, look forward to that, folks.
Hit her up.
Until then, I am on Twitter at Kempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find my extremely hot takes at Guillotine for You. That would be Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
I am Shan ND Stevens.
And I am Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
All right, guys. Well, that's the show. Once again, we thank you so much for listening. You made it all the way through with us once again. Until next time, we want you to know that we love you and we want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And stay the fuck away from me. Unless you've got your CDC vaccination card, and then I'll consider it.